recording? Yes, it is. Okay, great. So, first question, why did you decide to run for activities officer, and particularly why now as opposed to the first time around?
That's actually a really good question. So I'll start off by saying why activities officer. I think I've always been really, really involved in societies. I've just when I moved to the UK from France, it was obviously quite a shock. And I think that joining societies, it really kind of just helped made me feel at home, and I kind of got it helped me make new friends. And then this year I've been on the committee for the International Student Association, and I've been working closely with societies, and that's really kind of like it's really showed me how societies work as well as just how important they are, and I've been able to like notice the bits and bobs that go wrong and also the bits and bobs that do go right. And I think I've kind of got that different perspective from some other candidates, I guess, that like I haven't been on any committee of any specific society, but I have been on the International Student Association, so I do have quite a broad view of things. And then why now? Well, actually, I think I was always kind of looking at it there and there. And then when I think I was like, okay, no, you're not going to do this. Just you've got to focus on your studies, that very thing. But then my friends were like, but Zoe, you'd be so great at it. You clearly love doing the work you've been doing this year as part of the committee on the International Student Association. And I was like, you know what? Actually, like I might as well just go for it. I think I've got quite a lot of great ideas, if I say so myself. And yeah, I think I'd be really great at it, and I think I'd be able to bring some positive change, and yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's a great answer. So now that kind of leads on to from what you were saying before. What are you mentioned in your manifesto that you want to improve openness and inclusivity in society. So what are the main ways in which you think that's currently kind of either lacking or kind of needs improving, and how would you go about improving that?
Well, I think the first thing when I was kind of like doing research when I decided to nominate myself, I was talking to people, and I realized that training for cultural awareness training was just not compulsory. And I was like, why is that the case? That's completely ridiculous. Because I'm quite lucky that I've been friends with a lot of English people, so my accent is quite English. So I do kind of tend to fit in relatively well. But I think that sometimes when you move halfway across the country, like I can imagine it's just quite overwhelming just to come into society. And then it's all about adapting the language, making sure that you're talking in like a quiet environment, because of course if you've just traveled like 12 hours, last thing you want to be is in a noisy room where 10,000 people are trying to talk to you at the same time. Like as I say, it's just not a vibe. It's yeah, I just really think it's about making sure that international students really feel comfortable, because it's not the easiest thing to move country, and that they already have a lot to think about, a lot to do, and that as an SU, we should be able to provide them with an environment where they can feel like they can come up to us and be like, oh, I feel comfortable. I feel like I'm at home. I feel like I can talk to someone. I know where to go. I know that I know that the friends I'll make will be my friends for life. It's this kind of spirit that I really want to bring. And I think in some way it's been lacking in some ways where sometimes the right vocabulary, I guess, isn't used. There's a lot of, I guess for me, I personally find freshers are quite overwhelming sometimes. And so I imagine someone that's just traveled so many times through so many time zones. I'm like, if I'm overwhelmed coming from France, they must yeah. I just think a quiet environment would be much preferable.
Great. Okay. And then one of your other ideas is to create a art city, so a varsity for the arts. Excellent wordplay. So now you mentioned it being live streamed. Would you envisage it being an in-person experience as well? Sort of restrictions permitting, and like how would you want to sort of promote people getting involved more so than they already do when like plays or shows are put on the rest of the year?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So obviously it would be in person, of course, like permitting like the kind of restrictions. Hopefully by March everything will be in person, though we can, fingers crossed. But I think when I was kind of researching, and when I was thinking, I came through this idea back in December. I was like, the one thing that made me feel like I was part of a community, even though I'm not a massive sport person, was varsity. I I couldn't know a thing about basketball, and on varsity, I was like, I'm all in. I'm all in. I will do my best. I will support my team. I'm going to learn everything about basketball. The idea is to create something very similar for kind of the art, that I think sometimes it's not been shown enough. And I think sometimes there's quite a lot of stereotypes associated with the types of people who watch plays, who goes to these events. And I think that by having a specific 3-day event, so Art City, it would really kind of broaden the horizon where everyone can come, and it's really all about having a giant party or just a nice afternoon together with events, with varying types of events of different cultures. I think also like being able to show societies who may be lesser known. I think that's such a great opportunity. And then if it's live streamed, then anyone can see it, and the possibilities are pretty much, there's so many possibilities. As yeah.
Great, yeah, that sounds like a great thing if you can sort of if you can pull it off, yeah. But yeah, no, that sounds like, I think it's a fair point. Like, obviously Bath is a very sporty uni, but that's not all that people are interested in, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, and then you also mentioned having an inter-committee kind of community. What kind of what do you have in mind for that? Like, what sort of socials and plans do you have for that?
So this idea came to me when I was working this year. I've worked with so many committees, and I've kind of realized the benefit that I got out of it. Because I learn from them and they learn from me, and you feel so much more like in, how to say, in collaboration with everyone. You feel much more connected. So what I would have in mind is some events where basically committees can sign up as a committee, and then they can kind of like meet different people, and they can either talk, I hope they talk, but the idea would kind of be that they could collaborate. Not everyone on the committee would have to come, it's obviously optional, but the idea is to promote more cross collaboration between societies, so that, for example, societies who attract a specific type of members can also kind of branch out and reach new members who might never have thought that they would be interested, but their two committees realized that they had a common point and that they had a lot of things that they could do together. So my event is kind of like, it's not a networking event, as I say, but it's really kind of about connecting people who would have never met otherwise. And I think that would be so valuable to kind of, especially broadening the reach, broadening, I don't know if that's a word, broadening the reach of new members. And especially next year, it'll be so important with some first years who haven't had that same chance to kind of experience societies like we have our first and second years. So that'll be such a great opportunity. I really think if, and like when I'll do it, I think it'll be really great.
Great, yeah, that sounds really good. Okay, now we're going to make a bit of a sort of about turn. We're going to move on to the environment. So, how do you think the university is currently doing with kind of environmentally friendly initiatives? And what one thing would you make the SU do for the environment if you could?
Very good questions. Well, I think so. First of all, I'm not going to bash university, because I think they are doing a lot of things right. I think the first step of agreeing to go towards the climate action framework was a wonderful thing, and they've set some pretty good standards, which I would like personally to see the university kind of go beyond. Because whilst I think it's nice to kind of set yourself objectives, I don't think it's nice to go beyond, because things change, data changes. You need to be constantly evolving, which is why I hope the university will go beyond these agreements. Obviously, meeting those agreements will be the absolute priority, and they are already doing some things right, as you say. So I think they host everything on Microsoft Azure, which is a very green cloud. And having researched all the kind of different options, I found that I was like, oh, what can I criticize in Microsoft Azure? But there really isn't much. Yes, there'll always be inefficiencies, but they're doing this right. Um, and then I think the first thing I would like to implement if I'm elected, is food bins. I find it totally unacceptable that in a university that promotes, when in a university and an SU that promotes green living, you know, kind of living in an eco-friendly manner, that we can't even put our food waste, if we do have food waste, in a separate bin that can then be recycled into electricity. I mean, so many of us living in Bath already have this literally on our doorsteps. I struggle to understand how it's such an issue of putting it on campus. But obviously I've heard that it's slightly, as always, it's more complicated than you think it is, the traditional sentence. But I really think that'll be my first point. It sounds so basic, but I guess it is. I imagine also it is complicated. Having spoken to people from People on Planet, I'm pretty sure it's been complicated, and it has been complicated. I think we implemented one in Lime Tree, and that was very complicated. But I would like to see those all across campus. Yeah, that really bugs me.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I kind of never really thought about the fact there's no food bins, but that is ridiculous when you think about it. Yeah. Okay, now you also mentioned the Bath Award. Now, I'm sort of bringing it back. I didn't actually realise that it had been sort of discontinued. Do you know why it was stopped, and like how would you plan to bring it back?
So that's a very good question, because it's a very complicated topic. So it actually got it got taken away a year or two ago, which I thought was just really annoying personally because I had been planning to do it, and it kind of recognized the way you had to complete 100 hours, and then you had to do some paperwork where you kind of where you reflected upon your experiences, and that meant that you could have the Bath Award written on your what is it called again? Your degree at the end of the year. And so the problems with it was that it's a very resource intensive recognition scheme. There also wasn't a lot of people applying to it. It was mainly focused. I think a lot of people that are focused to it were international students, which is obviously awesome. But obviously the numbers were quite low, and that just meant that the number of people applying and then the staff. I don't think. Yeah, I think there's a lot of work that could be done. So obviously, when I say bring back the Bath Award, I mean renewing it and doing a new version of it, because I don't think you can ever create exactly what it is. But I think it's completely silly not to have a way to recognize our volunteers. I see the amount of work that all my friends do, you know, for their committees. They do so much work. They pour their absolute heart out. And I think it's a shame that they'll never be like, oh, I got this. You know, I think whilst it's nice to be able to say this, I think it's really important to recognize what you do, that what you do is incredible and it really contributes to the society. So how I would do that, I if I'm going to be completely honest, I can't really know. I obviously want to have certain number of hours completed, between 50 and 100. Well, I'm still trying to think about how we can make that the most inclusive as possible, because we want to think about people who have to work part-time, people who also have parents to look after, people who have different priorities, and that's absolutely fine. And I also want to make sure that we are being as inclusive as possible whilst we do the Bath Award. And another thing that's really important for me to keep in, and that was really good about the Bath Award, is the reflection bit where you talk about what you've learned, what have you actually learned. And I think that's a really important step, and it makes it that much more valuable, which I'll definitely keep when it does come back.
Great, thank you. Now, you mentioned also giving more flexibility to societies that need additional funding. Is there anything that's currently preventing them from charging like fees to their members, and like, would you sort of have anything in mind to like help people who would struggle to pay those extra fees?
So currently obviously the funding situation is a very delicate situation in regards to a lot, especially this year where we kind of this year everyone had the same society area membership fee. And I think for some societies, this membership fee won't be enough next year. They have their events that they organize require them to buy more, to buy more material, to loan more material. Maybe they have to hire speakers, and that same area membership won't be enough. It just won't be enough. I'd like to make it more inclusive. I would like to be able to work with the university, see if we could maybe use some of the hardship fund or maybe the alumni fund to be able to maybe use that money to buy the additional payment fees for the students that do want to join those societies. But I also understand that some societies will need to require additional payments. And but I also think equally, I have to recognise that some societies, they're fine with the society area membership and they don't really need much more funding. So I really want to provide that flexibility of societies being able to choose how much they want to charge their members, but also how much do they need to charge their members. But equally, I also want to make sure that it stays as inclusive as possible using funds that are available.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So now, this could be a bit of a difficult one, but if you could only implement one policy during your time in the role, what would it be?
For me, it would have to be the Bath Award. It's it's really close to my heart, personal, because I really wanted to do it, and I thought it was a really great thing that it is. And then I think it's completely ridiculous not recognizing the work all the volunteers do. When you think about it, we're all student volunteers, you know, everyone who works and who builds the community. I think we all deserve to be recognized, and that recognition is also really nice. It's also a really nice thing to be like, oh wow, like I did this, you know, I did this. And I think it's super important, like other universities have been able to do this, and putting it in a way which values and which encourage other students to pursue volunteering within the SU. Yeah, it's my favorite one, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, you make a very good case for it, for sure. Okay, now, final question. Given that there were no candidates and now there are 8, what sets you apart from the rest?
So I would say that I have a very different, unique perspective in the way that I haven't been on the committee of any society, a part of any arts society, for example. I think it's a very interesting thing to know the perspective of the outsider, of the one who doesn't do all the one who's been to all the events, the one who knows what's worked for him, what's worked for her. And I think that makes me a really unique candidate, that we've always had loads of very, very qualified candidates. And I think that the definition of qualified candidates, there's so many definitions of qualified candidates. And I think as an international student, I would also bring up a really unique perspective as both an outsider and an international student.
Okay, perfect. That's a great soundbite. So we'll finish it off there. I'll just stop recording.